This is the first in a series of videos that is going to lead us towards creating a very basic learning application using Adobe Flash Professional CS6. In this first video we are going to look at using the drawing tools to create some basic graphics. In this case that will be an apple and a banana. We can find the software under All Programs, followed by Adobe Master Collection CS6, and then look for the file Adobe Flash Professional CS6. It's got a red icon with FL on it, and this will open the software for us. It may take a few seconds to start off with. Just resize this. Okay, so the version that we will be working with all the way through is ActionScript 3. So before I walk you through the workspace, I'll just quickly reset my workspace. So if you ever lose anything, you can go to Window, Workspace, Reset, whichever version you're using will then reset. So now this is the original version that you are looking at. I'm going to create new ActionScript 3. And the first thing we'll see is a white box. The white box is known as the stage, and this is the visible area of our application. To the right we have the Properties and Library Inspector panels. First off, I'm going to change the settings for the stage size. So I'm going to use 1280 by 720 because that scales quite nicely across most screens. Is actually 720p. That's the size of that. Library is an area where we will eventually have all of our assets, so that could be audio, graphics, symbols, as we will discover along the way. And to the right of there we have our tools panel. Now with the tools I quite often pull those off so that I get a nice compacted version. At the bottom of the screen and across to the left hand side you will see the timeline, and within the timeline we can have several layers. Just a note for future reference, if you want to animate something on a layer, then it's one animation per layer, and so quite often you have to use several layers to achieve the effect desired. So at the top of the screen we've got File, which is where we can save, open and import. They're the main functions we'll be using. Edit, copy and paste, find and replace in some cases. View is quite useful for rulers, to have them switched on sometimes when you create interfaces. Insert, new symbol. Modify, where you can modify different objects. You may come across that for transform or arrange or even align. Text options such as font and size, and we won't be using commands, but we might use Control to test a movie or test a scene. We won't be using debug, I don't think. And in Window, this is where you find any panels if they go missing. Okay. So in this example, and once the software starts responding again, okay, so in this example now we're going to move on to creating some basic graphics. So the first thing I'm going to create is an apple, and I'm going to do that in a very basic manner using the oval tool, and we'll also use perhaps the subselection tool, the selection tool, or even one that's known as the convert anchor point tool. So I'm just going to choose the oval tool to start off with, and I'm going to select a colour that's appropriate. In this case I'll choose a greeny colour. I may or may not have an outline, but in this case I'm going to choose a kind of dark grey outline, almost a pencil outline. And then I'm going to draw a circle. Now if I hold the left mouse button and drag, you'll see that it creates ovals of varying shapes and proportions, but if I hold shift it creates a perfect circle. So in which case there we go, there is a circle. Now I can select the centre of that, which is known as the fill, by clicking once, and you'll notice that I've separated the outline and the fill. The outline is technically known as the stroke, and I can create a fill by bucket filling between a stroke. I'll just delete this by selecting and delete. I can select both together by double clicking, and that's quite useful when you want to move things around or turn them into a symbol, as we will do at an eventual point. Okay, so when we hover over the outline and the object isn't selected, we get a different cursor which allows us to indent and change the shape a little bit. So I might be able to just flatten off this shape a little to add a few imperfections. What I might want to do then is to use the subselection tool to select the shape, and you'll notice these little square points, they're known as anchor points, and they define the shape and also the curves between each point. So if I select the top one, what I can do is I can just move it independently, bring it down to create a little indentation and maybe just an even more subtle one at the bottom. There we go. So it's starting to look a little bit more like an apple. I might also just select the outline, go to properties, and make this a little bit thicker, so it's a bit more visible. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to create a stalk and leaf, and I'll do that using the oval tool and the pencil tool. So with the oval tool, what I'm going to do is create a thin oval like so, and I might just change the colour to be slightly different to the green that we've got here, and then I'm going to use the free transform tool. This will allow me to rotate the leaf, and I can rotate it around the centre like so. Just remembering to double click. When I select it, so I can rotate it around the centre like that, or I can move this transformation point to the bottom and rotate it like this. That makes make it a little bit smaller. So that's going to be one of my leaves, and then I'm going to copy and paste this. The way I can do that is double click, and then I can right click and copy, right click and paste, and just move this over here, transform that like so, and then we've got two leaves. And with the pencil tool, what I can do is I can draw over the shape like this, like so, and then I can deselect the bits that I don't want by selecting this line here, select this line here, and then we should be able to bucket fill between those lines with a slightly browny colour like that, and this is the basic format for our apple. We could add some detail using the pencil tool and a very thin stroke, which is and just draw lines on like this, just straighten it out a little bit. So that is one way we can do it. We can also use the brush tool, and with the brush and the smallest brush size, and if we're zoomed close enough in, zooming with Control and plus by the way, with the brush tool I can find a colour, slightly darker green, and choose from this brush mode. I'm going to paint inside. So what that means is when I paint inside of this and then crisscross like that, it will only paint inside of those lines because that's where I started, and everything else disappeared. So I can do that for this one here as well, and then I can just try to get a crisscross pattern, which creates quite an interesting pattern. Going back to the selection tool, the black arrow, I'm then going to select the fill for the apple. I'm going to give it a slight gradation. The way I do that is using the colour palette and then radial gradient. Now, the radial gradient allows you to put in different colour swatches along this element here. So you can have any number of colours and you can gradate it from one to another. So I might gradate from, for example, red to green, like that, as you might get with certain apple varieties. I could also put another swatch in there to make it a little bit more subtle, like that. I can then collapse my colour palette, and if I wish, rather than using the free transform tool, I can use something called the gradient transform tool to move those colours around. So I'm just going to select the whole thing. So that we can see more of it when I use this. So I select the gradient, and what I can do is I can move the centre point like this, so it goes across to one side. I can move the gradient around entirely like that, and I can also scale it or rotate it. So this allows me to scale it. I might want it to be a little bit bigger than that. This allows me to rotate it a little bit, so I might just move along like that, and this allows me to make it scale in just one axis, so it elongates it a little bit and changes the way that it looks, like so. So now I've got a bit of a blushing apple, and that is our first object, our first graphic. So I'm going to quickly zoom out. I need to select the whole thing, so I can draw a marquee by using the selection tool and dragging a box around the whole thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a symbol. So we convert to symbol, it's going to be a graphic, and this is going to just be called Apple. Okay. We will also eventually want this to be a different kind of symbol, but for now that will do. Okay, so if we go across to our library, we'll see that the apple then appears. So I can delete this from the timeline for now and use this stage to design my next object, which will be a banana. And for this I'm going to do that freehand using the pencil tool, ensuring that it's set to smooth here, and my colour will just start off with being yellow with a black outline, so when I fill it with the bucket it will work. Okay, so just going to zoom out and move across to the centre of the stage. The bananas tend to be quite misshaped objects, so what I'm going to do is try to do it freehand. That should work okay. And I'll just bring the tools across so they're closer to the image. And paint bucket yellow. Choose the outline again, just to create this. There we go. I might also draw a line across there and here. So what I can do, after deleting these line segments, is to bucket fill with a slightly different colour, maybe a dark grey. That's the end of a banana quite often tends to be. A little bit like that. Again, we could also create a gradient fill on there before we did the outline, or I can even remove the outline, select the fill, use the colour palette to create, in this case I'll probably choose a radial gradient again, get rid of the pink, make it a yellowy colour, a little bit too green, and one here which would be a bit more yellow than that. Maybe just a little bit more green, and then a bright yellow at the end. Like so. Moving across to the gradient transform tool, I would maybe elongate that. Maybe resize the whole thing in scale, like so. Maybe move the position down a little bit, and then rotate it a little bit, like that. Maybe even make it bigger. There we go, that's my banana. I'm just quickly drawing the centre line again, which gives it a little bit of an illusion of some shape. You could put more than one in. Select this bit, turn that into a symbol, call it banana. Okay, just double check that that's appeared in the library. There we can see it. So I've got apple and banana, which I can preview by clicking on them. And that's the end of the first video. Why is that crashing it?